Welcome back to the channel, everybody. Today, Mantis and I thought we would tackle a discussion about a topic that it sits near and dear to our hearts, and that is when movies use practical effects versus CGI. Now, if you've been with us for a while on the channel, we do appreciate you coming back and watching this. We have discussed many, many times how Mantis feels about bad CGI. It's one of his pain points. So uh, we do take that very, very seriously, and it means a lot to us when we talk about good CGI versus bad, and then also practical versus using CGI because we're children of the 80s and 90s. So
Yeah,
Mantis,
I was gonna say your last point there kind of maybe is why it seems to come up is because all of our favorite movies seem to be from the 80s and 90s. In which case, there was a mix of practical and special effects CGI type things that came out of those eras. Back in the day, obviously CGI didn't exist, so the practical effects was the only thing you did. You didn't hire graphic designers and all of these computer teams. You just hired latex guys and prop builders. That's what you did. That you had those guys instead of your CGI guys. um, I think one of the main things I can think of, moving into the more CGI era of movies, was Industrial Light and Magic, being uh, created because of one specific movie that they wanted to do, but there were no guidelines on how to do something like that. And I'm sure most of you that are watching this have seen this movie before, these movies, which is Star Wars.
Everything's perfectly all right now. We're fine. We're all fine here now. Thank you. How are you?
The original trilogy. Yeah, yeah, it's one of those movies that the techniques they use to film, especially the space scenes and things. I mean, these were a mix, I would say, of practical effects as well as, I wouldn't say CGI. There were some like little weird things they did, but it was mainly the techniques that they developed in filming that, to make the world, to make the universe feel big and make it look like it's in space and make those things look awesome. Those techniques were first done with those movies. They invented those things just to make those movies, and which I'm sure the movies that you've seen even recently uses industrial light and magic technology to make those CGI effects and stuff.
Well, and I think the thing with the Star Wars movies that was amazing too is it was one of the, at least it was one of the first movies I saw where they really put time and effort into. I mean, like the Mos Eisley spaceport, like they built those sets, and these are some epic sets they built for these movies,
Yeah.
and it makes it so much more real. And it hits home a lot for Mantis and I right now too, as we've been trying to film more things for the channel and go outside of discussion videos. We're realizing how much easier it's like, well, I could fix this in post production, but it's going to be a lot easier if we just have this, if we do this in a real setting, right? Or if we use this actually and we do this. Um, and it's like, what can
Yeah.
we do practically? And we have to ask ourselves is what can we do practically and make it look good? Because we don't have a special effects budget to, make all this cool shit.
Yeah.
And like we do all of this ourselves. That's it. We don't have editors, Mantis and I do this entire channel, everything ourselves. So we have to come up with ideas, and we have to write out scripts, and we have to do all of this stuff, and we have to make it. Can we shoot this? Like we have these grandiose ideas, but we're like, all right, is that
Is
realistic?
it
Can we
feasible?
film this?
And yeah, exactly.
Granted, it's on a galactically smaller scale than Star Wars, but we run into that. We're like, okay, hey, this will look a lot better if we can physically do it than trying to add it in post where it may just look out of place, right? Oh, I didn't
Weird.
get the green screen right, and I didn't whatever.
Well,
Um,
I
lighting.
want to bring it back. Yeah, I want to bring it back to Star Wars because there what and I remember seeing this in theaters as a kid. They re-released Star Wars. I don't know how old I was. I remember going to the mall with my dad and we saw it. They re-released the original trilogy, in which was the special edition, which I still have them on VHS in the gold box. I haven't watched them in a long time, but the reason, because you mentioned the Mos Eisley spaceport, right? So when they walk into the cantina in that film,
Dun, 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 dun,
um,
dun, dun, dun,
yeah,
dun, dun.
all of the aliens, everyone in that bar is in a suit. Like they made the aliens suits, and they made all of that. There were people in them, clearly, obviously, but they made all of those suits. Um, and you know, there's a scene when they're leaving that they didn't have in the original. When they get found out, they one of the I forget the guy's name. The one, he's in a dark hood and he tells the stormtroopers, he's like, "Rah, rah, rah, rah," and he's like, they're over there. So the stormtroopers are chasing them as they're trying to run onto the Millennium Falcon, right? Well, in the original scene, they just run straight on there and they're fighting them, shooting them, and they go, get off the planet, they get off Tatooine. However, in the special edition, when they get to the hangar bay, Jabba the Hutt is there. Okay. When they filmed that scene back in the 1970s, Jabba was not the Jabba that you know. Jabba
He was a
was
man.
a fat guy.
Look, Jabba, next time you want to talk to me, come see me yourself.
Right? In a fur coat. Right? So they filmed the scene with Harrison Ford, like walking around talking to this fat guy. Right? Well, in the special edition, they were like,
Oh god, the
George
tail.
Lucas is like, I've got a great idea. We have all this new CGI. We'll just use that scene that we filmed back in the 70s and we'll take the fat guy out of the movie and put in a CGI slug, which is, as we know from the third movie, is actually Jabba. And so you have the CGI like slug, and there's a scene in there, or there's a like a little spot where in the original filming that Harrison Ford walks behind the guy, right? Well, you can't really walk behind Jabba because he's got a tail and he's fat, right? So they have this weird thing where he's like walking, then he just goes.
Sometimes. You think I had a choice? But I got a nice, easy charter now.
Like that. Like he stepped on his tail, and then you see, they make Jabba go, ooh, like he stepped on his tail. But it's this weird movement. It's so weird. So, like, why even put that in the movie? To me, it's just George being George, some creation stuff. But my point is, it looked so out of place, right? The CGI just looked out of place.
No, but here's the thing, though. So here's the problem with CGI. Is it's like playing video games, right? When you played the original Gran Turismo or the original whatever, that was the most amazing looking car game, and the cars look so beautiful and stuff. If you go play Gran Turismo 1 right now, you're gonna be like, what the fuck? This came out of the 50s or something. Like, it looks so shitty. Well,
True.
when the original, the special edition Star Wars came out, that was the first time you saw CGI, so it was believable. You're like, holy shit, like this looks good. Now when you go back and watch it, you're like, ah, damn, like it doesn't age very well. No CGI, no shitty CGI ages well.
Right. There's good CGI in that movie, specifically the attack on Yavin 4, when all of the X-Wings are going around the red planet. That scene is not in the original. You can see, like, they added, like, more X-Wings. You can see their heads moving around in the cockpits. Like that, they did that really well. Cool stuff. There's other times where it's not, like when like on Mos Eisley and you see them, they're riding those sand dune like guys, and it's just like weird looking, and I just don't get it. Again, we can get off Star Wars because there are other movies that we do particularly like.
Real quick, before we move off Star Wars, one thing I am going to cut in here is, remember they did that little spoof that if George Lucas did this, and they added like 50 aliens in there, and there was just all kinds of stuff. I'm going to cut that in here because it's beautiful. I love it.
The dark side.
Yeah. if there's a thing about that, the special editions is George just got really happy with the CGI. He thought it was this coolest thing, so he just added an
Well,
assload of it in there.
and for those of you who maybe aren't as old as Mantis and I or don't remember, I mentioned it briefly in one of our other videos, but for me, to date, I thought the original Ninja Turtles movie that released in like the late 80s, I mean, that was practical. They were in suits. I still
Yeah,
think it looks better than anything they've produced from Ninja Turtles, even the two live action movie, well, kind of live action movies. The one was
yeah, kind of.
super like cartoony looking, but then this last one where they did the two with Megan Fox and Stephen Amell was in
Mm,
the sequel, I thought they looked like shit. Like I thought that looked
yeah,
terrible. I would have rather seen them in those same suits from back in the 80s and 90s. I would have rather seen that. They looked better to me.
Mm-hmm. Pizza dude's got 30 seconds.
And I was more like
yeah.
it kept me in there like it was believable, right? Uh,
Yeah, that's the thing. Because I'm going to go to another movie that we both really like. I mean, I know I love this movie. It is Aliens. And really the trilogy. Again, I particularly like Aliens. The second one is a rare case where the sequel's better than the original, in my opinion. However, it doesn't really matter. The practical effects that they did in that movie are insane. The way, like, if you watch the behind the scenes documentaries on that, and some of the ad stuff you can get if you've got the Blu-ray like box set, um, there's some stuff that they did. Like, you had guys, like, people were in suits, they were in the suit, then they had other people controlling different parts of, like, the queen. And I gotta say, if I was an actor or actress, I think I want to say it's Ramirez in that movie when they're in the ducks, and she's got the light or the fire or whatever, and you see the alien just kind of pop in the screen, right? And its lips are curling back, and like the fucking saliva is like dripping. Like, I feel like it'd be really easy to act in that, because that would scare, like, that'd be fucking scary. Like, I mean, realistically.
Now, see, so that raises an interesting point, right? As much as I love that and the practical effects, you kind of have to give it up to a lot of the actors now that engage in really heavily CGI'd movies because like you're reacting to things that aren't there and you have to show fear
Yeah.
and emotion and whatever to things that don't exist. And again, just from the little bit of filming we've done where I'm like, I gotta mark a place, you need to look right
Yeah.
here, you need
A
to
lot of
this.
prep
There's a lot
ahead
of
of
prep
time.
to it. And then you have
Yeah.
to like where some of those props back in the day would have been scary as shit. Like if somebody was holding the prop head back then of a xenomorph and you just turn around and go, what the
Yeah.
fuck? Like it's
Yeah.
easier, I feel like, to and maybe that's why the movies were so great back in the day because it was just easier
Yeah.
to make it a believable reaction when you're in this. They probably filmed this in this tiny little space, and here's this fucking alien that pops out.
Yeah.
Um,
Like, I mean, even the last fight scene in that movie where, Ripley's in the, I always call it the SCV suit, because if you've ever played StarCraft, it looks like it is the same fucking thing, right? She's battling the queen, and the queen is just like jumping down, and it's like,
Get away from her, you bitch!
it's so great. It looks
the
so
limbs are
good.
hacking into her, and they're
Yeah.
actually hitting the thing
Yeah.
she's in, and it's like,
The
again,
lighting looks correct because you don't have to fuck with that in post, because it's the lighting that's on there. I mean,
and
things react correctly.
And that's a big thing, and that's what you don't really think about until you start actually trying to film things that you do on a green screen is, like the one that's behind me. I have to be lit correctly and far enough away from the green screen, and you got to light the green screen versus lighting the character. And Mantis pointed out to me when he was in studio, I'm showing him this scene I filmed for our upcoming project that we have. Uh, and he goes, well, the lighting on you looks a little bit different than you would imagine where the environment is. And I start looking, I was like, well, fuck, he's right. Now I got to go back and reshoot it because the lighting on me is different than what the background is. So all that comes into
Mm.
play versus just doing it practically. Unfortunately, the scene that we were shooting, I can't do that practically. I wish I could. I can't do that. So, you have to go into
Yeah.
that. But it's so kind of to full circle it where it does bring back around because one of my favorite movies when we talk about CG versus practical is the original Terminator movie. Okay,
Hmm.
because in that,
Oh
a
yeah.
lot of people don't realize that the robot, when he actually gets all of his skin burned off there towards the end, that's a real robot. Now obviously it's not state of the art, like he's not whatever, but he was remote controlled, but they created that. So
Right.
he looks
Yeah.
real and he
It looks
looks
awesome.
scary as shit. Right now,
Yeah. Yeah.
the other side of that is when you watch that movie where Arnold starts taking physical damage, it looks really bad. His rubber mask stuff looks really, really bad. And there are parts you're
it,
like, holy shit, you could tell
it
it's
reminds
not.
me of Total Recall. Like
Yes,
it reminds me of Total Recall, right? Like the weird faces, like in certain space. It's hokey. It's whatever, right?
I'm
I,
okay
I
with it
get.
though. I can deal with it.
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Now, if you
I
watch
think
the
where
Terminator 3, where his skin is like on his head is literally like burned off or whatever, and you see parts of the metal sticking out, that looked badass though. Um,
Yeah, yeah. I think where you tend to notice the biggest differences and where tend to lend a crutch to CGI is when you get into like outer space movies, right? Like there's no you have to, right? You can't film fucking in space. You can't do those things that you want to do. Those type of sci-fi movies lend more towards the CGI and they have to be good. You have to do it that way. There's no other way to do it, right? However, I think with horror movies specifically, because I'm thinking of like the thing, not the original thing, but the thing that came out in the 80s with Kurt Russell. Uh, the the practical effects in that movie are wild. Like the shit they did was wild.
the Blob,
Um,
all of those
yeah,
80s horror movies, man. Like you had
yeah,
to get
yeah. It
inventive.
tends to look better. Yeah, it tends, in my opinion, it looks it. You know what it is? It's because it's horror, right? So it's supposed to look unnerving. It's supposed to look weird and kind of gross and like make you feel awkward and scared. And they do that, right? Like when the dog like die. I don't want to ruin the movie. If you haven't seen the thing, you need to go watch it.
Well, like you said, the 80s,
But
because there's a thing from I think
yeah,
like the
sorry, yeah, not the
50s or
recent one.
something. Um,
Yeah, there's three
yeah,
actually.
there's an
Yeah,
old,
there.
old
Yeah,
one. There's the
not
80s
that
one
one.
he's talking about, and then now there's another
Yeah,
reboot.
yeah, yeah. There's
Go
a
in the
scene
middle.
where there's where this dog like dies and opens up, and there's these tendrils that come out, and like it's just so like it's so creepy, right? I don't think you would get. There's no way you would get that same feeling with a CGI effect during that. I know in Evil Dead, a newer horror flick, which is really gross. A lot of that was practical. Some of it was CGI. Obviously, you can't do cutting people's arms off and shit like that and make it look decently new without it, But there are practical effects in that movie that are really weird. But then, kind of going back to the aliens, at some point, someone thought it was a good idea to make the aliens not practical. And I want to say, yeah, Aliens 4, yeah, with the swimming ones.
I'll cut that in, which I've actually
Yeah,
cut it
yeah,
in on another video before, but I will cut that in.
yeah. Like, why? Why would you do that? Everything else was working fine. Just fucking, I don't know, put a little like a little motor on them and make them swim, or put them on a string
When
and pull them.
when the
Like,
one comes up and he like because it gets right in your
yeah,
face, right in the camera's face, it looks so terrible. Them
yeah.
swimming
Like,
alone just looks terrible.
I don't know why. I don't. It's some cases, even in newer movies, it's like you look at CGI. We brought this up before. Like Wonder Woman '84 is just bad. It's like someone made a mistake there. I know that's not how it's supposed to look. You can't tell me. And with Flash, oh, it's supposed to look like that, right?
Bullshit.
I I don't I don't believe you. I don't believe you. You know.
So now again, so we if we're discussing franchises here, one thing that annoyed me was, I grew up, I love the James Bond movies, right? And up until Die Another Day, that stars Pierce Brosnan and Halle Berry, they had
Hmm.
never used CGI ever in a James Bond movie.
Hmm.
Everything was practical. Even in The World Is Not Enough, which came right before it, they do a scene
Yeah.
where he takes this little boat and he goes under the water. They built a rig,
Yeah.
and Pierce Brosnan goes. He's got an oxygen mask, clears the bubbles. They holds it like he goes underwater and does that little scene. It's in a little pool, but they film it.
Oh yeah.
You
You
know,
can tell it's him. I
yeah.
mean, he adjusts his tie when he's under the water. It's him.
Well, and
Yeah.
that's the thing, and that right there is a key point. Is there those times when they're doing the CGI and they're doing stuntmen stuff, and they blatantly can tell it's not the actor. It pulls you out of it, right? You lose that
I
immersion
don't.
factor.
I want to call it the mustaching, but
We'll
yeah.
get to that. But it kind of ruins it. Where James Bond up to that point, all of them they'd all been practical effects, and then Die Another Day, they start on this like 50-foot wave, and it looked shitty. And there's the
Yeah.
big thing is when you have bad CGI, it completely destroys it. Now, Avengers movie was heavily CGI'd, right? Almost every
Oh
fucking
yeah.
thing they did. Hell, even when Thanos has the Reality Stone and he's like, they're in the like when he's showing Titan, he says it was beautiful, and you just see that. I'm like, dude, that's a transition I could make in DaVinci Resolve right now. But it's fine. It worked for it, but they also did it very well. They spent a lot of money on the CGI. But when you have Wonder Woman 1984, you have some of these other movies that they kind of start skimping out on the CG budget. Flash, where they just stopped giving a
Yeah.
fuck. It looks bad and it ruins the movie. It pulls you out of it. It's kind of like
Yes.
I'll kind of equate it to, and I'm not going to go on a tangent here, but like with video games back in the day, right? They didn't have the graphics, so the story had to be amazing to kind of immerse you into and pull you in, right? Well,
Mhm.
and that's kind of with practical effects. They didn't have all this special effects, so they had to make effects that look great to make you believe. And
Yeah.
CG can be the same thing, but it has to be done very, very well, and it makes you believe that this could happen versus poor CGI or where you could maybe it makes more sense to do it practical versus CG.
I think it's about keeping you in the moment, keeping you in the movie, right? Because like to your point, if you have good CGI, you don't notice it that it's bad, right? But when it's bad, all of a sudden you realize you're watching a movie. Like, because there's always a point when you're watching movies or shows that you forget that you're actually watching a movie or a show, right? Like, your brain doesn't understand. You're involved in what's going on, right? But the
If it's
second
good.
something is, if it's good, yeah. But the second it's bad, you're just like, what? Wait, what am I doing? Like, that was terrible. Now I realize I'm watching a movie and I'm not immersed. I'm not invested anymore. It's not believable, and now I feel uh, like yeah. You just get taken out of it, and you don't want that. You want to be engaged the whole time through.
Well, like let's bring it to something a little newer. Stranger Things season 4 with Vecna. He was practical. That was a complete suit. They made him up. He spent hours a day in makeup, and it looked
Mm,
amazing when they did close-ups,
yes.
when they did, kind of pan shots. Everything looked great. He could interact with the environment. You didn't have all these limitations of a CGI creature, uh, but it looked scary and it kept you in there. And you're like, holy shit. Versus seeing something you're like, oh, okay, that looks a little shitty, or maybe on this
Well,
scene, because with CGI, if you don't do everything right, especially like if you're doing camera pans, you can start noticing details. You have to do every single thing right, and sometimes. I mean, you're going frame by frame, and you got to imagine your normal movie films at 30 frames a second. Okay, so for
mhm,
1 second, you
yeah.
have to go through 30 frames. I've had to do it to adjust details. Okay, and if motherfucker just says, it's Friday, I don't want to go through all this, I'm gonna skip a few frames, it looks like shit because then you catch that little itty bitty
No,
inconsistency.
you're right. I think Stranger Things is an interesting thing to talk about because um there are heavily like that show is heavily CGI'd for obvious reasons. One, specifically because it's a TV show. Uh, I feel like the especially the first couple seasons that they you know they're on a time crunch. They have a limited budget via Netflix. Um, it didn't grow into the phenomenon that we know now, right? Um, but also the Duffer Brothers, correct me if I'm wrong, that's who
Yes.
wrote and directed that,
Yes.
are very you say you're a child of the 80s, they're children of the 80s. So I feel like they're kind of have our view on the whole practical versus CGI. They used practical when they needed to, and then when they could get away with using CGI and make it look right, they did it, right? Like obviously in the second season, the ending fight, like with the big fucking thing, the big I don't know what it's actually called, um, like tearing up that mall. Like there's no way you could get away with that. With is that season three? Like yeah, there's no way you could get away with that. Uh, doing a practical effects on the budget that they had. There's just no way they could do that. Even the I keep wanting to call them gargoyles, but that's not what they're called. Demigorgons. Yeah, the demigorgons are clearly CGI, right? And I think just because of the nature of how fast they move, you couldn't do a practical effect of something like that.
And
It
again,
would not look right.
you're talking about a limited budget, a show budget. You have limited
Sure.
space to film. You're not going to build all these sets like again a Star Wars movie. Where I mean, you can go out there by fucking Lucasfilm, and you can go out there where the Skywalker Ranch is, and you could film. You got acres to film shit if you really wanted to. I'm not saying that's what
Hmm.
they did, but when you're talking about a TV show, yeah, you're limited on what you're going to be able to do, and it makes more sense, especially again, we talk about with us. Am I going to create this entire set for 3 seconds of filming, or do I just want to green
Right.
screen it? Because like
Right.
this could take a couple of weeks to build a set.
Well, I'll tell you what the director wants to do, but I'll tell you the movie studio is going to tell you to do. Like, like we're not investing that money so you can film 3 seconds of this. You're not building this whole set for 3 seconds. It's not happening. That's what they'll tell you. You know.
Yeah, and it's like, okay, well, we'll CGI it, which don't get me wrong, still takes a while, but it's more cost effective and time effective, I guess I should say, in some cases especially when you're
Sure.
dealing with a TV show. So,
Sure. Yeah.
um, and that's kind of, and I'd be curious, guys. Let us know down in the comments what your feelings are on it, especially if maybe you haven't seen some of these things we're talking about. I keep seeing all these
Yeah.
reactions uh, on YouTube where people are reacting to Terminator and Aliens for the first time. So I gotta feel like a lot of you that might be watching haven't seen some of these movies, like the original Ninja Turtles movies and
Mhm.
things, to kind of understand where we're coming from, right?
Sorry, it reminded me of Chucky or Child's Play, because the obviously the original Child's Play was just a little like even I think the newer one, it's just a little doll, someone's controlling it, right? It's creepier, it's just is way creepier. So
I don't know. I like the newer Child's Play where he's this doll that obviously it's no way that technology would exist right now, but he's an actual doll and he computer messes him all up and everything like that. It worked. I didn't think it was bad. I like that one. And then Megan, if you haven't seen Megan, Megan's really good.
mhm.
It just kind of it doesn't set up like we're at current level technology, and then all of a sudden somehow we're way up here, and
Right.
we're
Yeah,
at it.
yeah.
But they're good, and they did a lot of with Megan. They did a lot of practical and then some CGI stuff too. So they made
Yeah.
practical, and I feel like you're seeing that more and more come out where it's like, hey, can we go practical? Because clearly, again, some of these bigger budget movies that you would think, oh, hey, this should be good, the CGI is looking like shit lately. I don't know what the fuck is happening. Like, did the CGI people go on strike too? Is it like,
I don't know. I don't know how that works with them. I know if I was an actor, I would much rather have everything in front of me like a play. Cuz I mean, I would assume and I don't know this, but I would assume most actors were brought up in theater. They did theater and that's how they learned to act. and so there are no CGI in theater. Everything's in front of you. You're reacting what's in front of you. I feel like that's how I would want to film. And
There's
most of them are purists in that sense, I bet.
there's a reaction channel I do watch, and she talks about she came from a background doing plays and things, and she's reacting to Thor: Love and Thunder, where they're doing the play on New Asgard, and he's like, "I'm
Okay.
disappearing," and then he's crawling behind the rock to show like he's disappearing,
Right.
and she goes, "Here's that's so real, right? Like you would have to hide behind a prop and get off stage to make it real.
Right.
Again, it
Yeah.
still looks shitty, but as real as it can be." So I gotta imagine at
Right.
least that makes it easier, right?
Yeah. That's what I would say. And again, guys, if there's if you're kind of wanting to know what we're talking about, where we're coming from, there's a few movies. We'll give you five that we suggest that you watch in regards to this, and maybe you've already seen these. But like we'd mentioned, any of the first three Aliens movies, I would suggest the first or second one.
Here's the thing.
I know
The second one's best to
the stories; it's easier to
well,
follow.
the
Yeah.
second one's best to kind of really focus on the point that Mantis is talking about. But in that, I feel like go ahead and watch the first one because you do want to kind of know that storyline a little bit and just don't jump into
Mm,
it. So watch the first two, three. You don't need
yeah.
to. You don't gotta.
Yeah.
Uh, but
Yeah.
I'm sorry. Go on. I just want to say that, like,
No. No.
if you're
Yeah.
two is definitely the one you want to watch for it, but I would start with one just so it's not weird.
Right. And then the um, Star Wars, obviously, A New Hope. If you haven't seen A New Hope, you should. It's one of the greater movies, pop culture movies in existence. So I'm surprised if you haven't seen it. You should. As if you're going the horror route, Aliens is more of a sci-fi horror, but I like The Thing is kind of in the same genre there. The new it's John Carpenter's Thing, right?
Yes.
I don't want to misquote this.
Yes. John
Yeah.
Carpenter's thing.
You can get it Blu-ray. You can get it like today we're filming this. It's currently Thanksgiving. However, Black Friday deals. You can get I think even regular price. You can get a Blu-ray of that for like $10. Like it's not expensive.
I just got Blu-ray of Aquaman for $5.99.
Yeah. Yeah. So and then if you want to, I'm trying to think of bad CGI movies that you could watch. Again, the Wonder Woman 84, the end of that movie, you don't even need to buy the movie. You could just literally YouTube the last fight scene, and I'm sure that it's out there with Cheetah.
I
And
think even
then
going to Aliens 4, right? Like watch the whole
yeah,
Aliens
Aliens.
saga, franchise saga, and then you'll kind of see how it degrades as they inject
Yeah.
CGI. That's not bad. You got a whole day. And
Yeah.
definitely watch the Ninja Turtles, the
Yes.
original
Yeah.
Ninja Turtles movie.
Yep. Really good practical stuff in there. And you'll kind of get where we're coming from on why I would like. I'm not saying get rid of. My final thought is this: I'm not saying get rid of CGI completely because I think that's a bad decision. There needs to be CGI where it's warranted. You know, um, and then use practical effects first if you can, and supplement it with CGI if it's not a use case for it. Is how I would approach it. That's my viewpoint on it. Because I think again, it adds to an element of realism that you just don't get with CGI when actors are like you said, because I just rewatched the Multiverse of Madness. Like I'd have to imagine like 90% of that movie was done in front of like just a green screen. Like they're just actors and green screens and on wires. Like it had to have been.
Oh yeah.
So yeah. So it's just like I don't know. I prefer it. I feel like there's a realism it brings to the movies. It keeps you invested. Um, yeah, especially in horror movies. It's just it adds to it exponentially. I think.
So my final thought on it is don't use CGI where you don't need to. And what I mean is like if Mantis and I are in the same room doing something, if we can avoid CGI, we shouldn't have CGI, right? Like it's not we're filming something space or we're not filming an epic battle where I got a CGI and stuff. If we're just sitting there doing talking or doing whatever, don't
Yeah.
count the green screen behind me. But like it's just normal, like we don't like there shouldn't be CGI if it's in a scene that you could film in real time practically you shouldn't have CGI, right? Like, because
Yeah.
I mean, honestly, if it's basic scenes and things like that, give me some outdoor shots. Actually, be out there. Have some sets, things like that. Don't just, oh well, we're filming on a back lot of a studio, so we need to have an outdoor in the wilderness shot. We'll just green screen it. Well, no, fucking go out there, go into some damn park, get a permit, and
Yeah.
fucking put a little effort into it.
I
Like
feel
just
like most places, if you drive 20 minutes in any direction, you could possibly hit some wooded areas, right? Like, like it's not that difficult.
yeah, at least definitely around here. So it's like, don't put CGI where it doesn't need to be. Save it for the times. And that's kind of the thing is when you want to do something epic, bring in the CGI, right? Everything else,
Mhm.
especially horror movies. Horror movies is one for me. Basically, there's almost no time I think CGI belongs in there. You could do it practically if you do it well and you have somebody who's passionate about doing it. So that's our
Yeah.
take on it, guys. Let us know down in the comments. I mean, how you feel about it, and if you haven't had much exposure to a lot of practical effects driven movies, definitely go. I will have a list. I know we said it, there and then,
Put it in the
but
description.
yeah,
Yeah.
we'll have that on the description, but I'll also have it kind of showing up on the screen. Goes back to I do that shit in post just because like I don't we don't script these. A lot of times I'm like, hey, Mantis, we're going to do this video tomorrow. And he's like, oh, hey, cool. Or he's like, hey, what if we did this video tomorrow? We're like, hey, so we don't script these. We don't plan this stuff out. We want to give you actual, hey, here's our thoughts on it. We just saw this, right? We're right there with you.
Mhm.
So, I don't have a lot of that shit prep to just go ahead and throw. I do that in post. That's the beauty of post production. Um, but that keeps it, I feel like, a little more real with you. Whereas we haven't planned this out, we didn't script out what we're going to talk about, which is also why we go on tangents, kind of like this one right here.
Yeah.
So, but if you've made it this far with us, guys, we're trying to keep this one a little bit shorter as well. Definitely consider liking the video, subscribing to the channel because that content we keep referencing is coming out here soon. And then giving the video a like. Let us know down below what you thought about this topic, our takes on the topic, and what is your take on it.
Yeah, let us know your favorite, practical effects in a movie. The movie could be terrible, but the effect was awesome, or maybe it was really bad, or maybe the CGI was bad of something we just completely forgot about, like the mustache on Henry Cavill.
I knew you were going to
But yeah,
bring that back up. You could not let
let
it
let
go.
us let us know what your thoughts are. Yeah.
Yeah, or if there's a movie that maybe we haven't seen, you haven't heard us mention. I know in our games to movies movie, we talked about the Warcraft movie that we neither of us had seen. If it's something like that, let us know down in the comments. Like, hey, this one either has really great CGI or really great practical effects, or maybe it goes the other way, and we'll check it out and
Mm.
we'll mention it here on the channel. So, Mantis, unless you have anything else.
No, I'm good.
All right, guys. Well, we do appreciate it, and we will catch you next time.
Later.